We're live. Greetings, I'm Dr. Al Freeman, Director of LCMS School Ministry, and thank you for joining us today on Thoughts on Thursday, where we are discussing special education. And a great presentation today that we have coming to us from BJ Weimer and Tracy Salgado. As a reminder, Will Van, our Manager of Online Support Services, is here with us. And anytime you have questions, please put those in chat or anything else. We are live on Facebook and where else, Will?
Twitter and YouTube as well.
Twitter and YouTube as well. So we're very thankful for BJ and Tracy as we close off episode 3 in this series, and very thankful for all of their work. BJ, if you've been with us, you know that she is with LASE Specialized Education in St. Louis, serving a multitude of schools throughout the Missouri District, St. Louis area, greater St. Louis area. And I can remember, BJ, do you stretch into Illinois just a little bit? There's a couple schools that you serve.
Bit, yeah, just over the river.
Yeah, and BJ, just well-versed in special education, 46 years as a teacher, administrator, university instructor, and with her role in LACE right now, again, serving a multitude of our schools, students in the greater St. Louis, Missouri district area. And Tracy Salgado, Dr. Salgado is with the LSEM, Lutheran Special Education Ministries, that operates in a lot of states throughout the country and supports a lot of special education teachers placed in our Lutheran schools throughout the multitude of states. And again, extensive background in special education and working now with many teachers and coming on board at LSEM just a few months ago. So we're very blessed to have you as part of LSEM and the great network of Lutheran schools. Two incredibly well-versed individuals who are here to help you and guide you, not only today, but LSEM and LACE are always there for you for discussions, support, and everything else. So why don't I open us in prayer, and then I will turn it over to the experts in BJ and Tracy, who today will talk about what do you do when you have special education students in your classroom, and how do you handle all these different situations that might arise. All of that in about 45 minutes. So, after that, you'll know everything, right? Let's open in prayer. Heavenly Father, we give you thanks. Thanks for all those who are placed in your schools to do your work. Our Lutheran schools who serve so many students and families and communities. We give you thanks for Tracy and BJ and their great background and support of our educators and our students who are placed in our Lutheran schools that maybe have different methods of learning and growing and becoming who you've called them to be. Help them and guide them as they guide your educators in our schools to serve those students and those families. May we always do your work in all that we do, reaching out to the students, letting them know that they are wonderfully and uniquely made, that they are your child and have so many wonderful gifts and talents to grow into and will serve you as they move through our various grade levels and into society as they become Christian leaders of tomorrow. Be with us today. Help us to celebrate all of the students and all of the families in all of our schools. Be with us as we prepare for Lutheran Schools Week as well. All these things we place in your son's name. Amen. Tracy and BJ, I think we are going to run the PowerPoint from here. So those of you who are watching this know that there might be a delay here and there. And we're a little slow on the draw here at the national office sometimes, so you might have Tracy or BJ say, okay, switch the slides. It's just a challenge that we have here in the national office, but great information today. I'm really looking forward to this discussion. All yours. Are you doing the
Tracy? I believe you're muted right now.
I'm sorry. Thank you. Yeah. Like I was saying, Al, thanks so much for having us today. We really appreciate it. We're really excited to talk with all the teachers, all the people who are with us watching today about SPED 101, some common strategies used in special education that are great to use with all students, even in the general education classroom. Our agenda for today includes our why did we choose this topic, some vocabulary that might help our viewers with understanding some of the conversation that we have, and then we are going to end with some strategies that can help all of the students in the classroom. So our why. If you look at the graphic with the map on it here, this is from the Center for Educational Statistics. And according to this research entity, there are 7.3 million students in our schools with learning needs. These are all kids who have IEPs. And that makes up 15% of the total student population, 15%. So this is our why. So these are the children, our gen ed teachers are having these children in their classroom. And when it's 15% of the kiddos, that's a pretty big number. So these students have IEPs and other specialized learning needs. Unfortunately, our teacher prep programs, you know, I can understand they're teacher prep programs. They can't spend all their time on every nuance that happens in the classroom. And so gen ed teachers maybe get a class about special education, or maybe special education information is kind of woven into the teacher prep program. So this is our why. It's a great idea as the gen ed teacher to develop a really strong relationship with your sped teacher, gather ideas from that person, support them as best as you can, and be their professional partner. It'll benefit you. It'll benefit that special ed teacher, and it'll definitely benefit the students in your classroom, all of your students. So hopefully the information that we give you today is going to prepare you and give you a good foundation to do just that. The other goal we have for you is that we want to provide information that will offer you support for all of your students, some tips, some tricks, some strategies that will benefit your neurotypical students, your twice identified students, and your students with learning differences. So our goal is to strategies that are good for all students. So let's go through some vocabulary. This is just an example of some vocabulary. And the next slide, they list all the vocabulary that we really want you to know today so that our conversation and that your understanding of our conversation can be enhanced. Next slide, please. Yeah. So we've got gen ed, which is just the general education classroom. That's you, teachers who are watching. SPED is just a shortened version of special education. Disabilities. So there's something called IDEA, which is the next word. According to IDEA, there are a list of eligibility categories, and those categories, those eligibility categories, are translated into disability. So that's the difficulty that the student is having accessing the curriculum. That would be their disability. IDEA is a federal law called Individuals with Disabilities Education Act, and this law outlines protections for students with disabilities. Then we have the IEP. Any student that is determined to have an eligible disability to qualify them for services will have an IEP written. IEP is Individualized Education Plan. We talked a great deal about this. That was our main focus of our topic last month. And the link to that video, that YouTube video, is in the resources section at the end of the presentation. But IEP is a plan designed to meet and address the specific learning needs of a student identified with a learning disability, again, as outlined in IDEA. Then we have SLD, which stands for Specific Learning Disability. According to the Center for Educational Statistics, back on that other graphic, this is the most identified area of disability for students. So usually a student is identified as a SLD. They have a specific learning disability, which is usually in reading or math. And then we've got twice diagnosed students. These students might be on the gifted end in some areas, but then they might have a learning disability in other areas. That's a possibility, and those students might be in your classroom. All right, I am going to turn over things to BJ, and she's going to start us off with some tips, tricks, and strategies to make your classroom inviting for all students, especially those who are identified. BJ?
Thanks, Tracy. And we want to start talking today about setting up the routines and the expectations, the structure. And, while we realize most teachers have schedules and these are really important for many children, they are especially significant, really significant for students with special learning and behavior and emotional needs. Those are the kids we're talking about today. A child may feel really anxious over not knowing what's coming or what's being expected. And so to provide consistency and predictability in the classroom routine, we need to build in a sense of real security and confidence. And that's going to happen with that schedule that we build. So permanently posting that daily schedule in the classroom is just a great way to ensure that our students have this. And it can be easily, that they can easily access that or access it. So they need to be able to know what activities they can expect throughout their day, and then just when that activity is going to happen. Now, where older students have their various subjects posted, oftentimes they can have them listed on the board. Maybe they have it on a chart. Oftentimes it's really beneficial if our younger kids have it in a way that is just very simple, and having just the simplicity of a visual schedule, similar to what you see on the slides right now, something that has maybe photos or a pictorial representation here, such as we have here, that just represent the activities of the day, is really helpful. And just being able to have anything that's, if there are anticipated changes in the day's routine, it's just really helpful for kids. Just to have an idea, some advance notice, at the start of their day. And that way they can kind of follow along what's happening in the events and when the activity is going to occur. For example, think about if the class is going to be attending a special school assembly. Maybe it's going to happen right after recess, or maybe there's going to be a guest that's going to visit during the science class in the afternoon. Knowing about those changes in advance is really going to alleviate the anxiety or maybe ongoing questions that are going to come up by some kids. Sometimes we think it's going to be a lot of fun if we can just surprise them with some of these kinds of things. But we do have those students that just get really anxious over those kind of things. And we need to really be mindful of that, prepare them in advance, so that fun that we think is going to happen doesn't end up being a meltdown later in the day. So thinking about that. Now, some students are going to need to also have regular reminders about these things. And so even though we have really well-established classroom routines, especially after a longer break, we've just had the Christmas holidays and we've been in school for 4 or 5 months already. And kids we expect that they've had plenty of time to know what the classroom routines are and what the schedule looks like. But a lot of times these kids come back, sometimes they struggle. And even though we think they know exactly what's expected of them, but they come back and they have a hard time remembering what was expected of them, or just getting back into that routine. So sometimes just taking a little bit of a break, it can be just helpful to take a few minutes, just kind of reviewing what those classroom schedules are, what those expectations are, just kind of resetting all of that. And it's just worth it. It takes a few minutes, not a lot of time, but just can really alleviate some of the problems that some of these kids can have. So just a thought to include when we're scheduling our instruction through the day too. Another thought about that is to build in intentional breaks for students. Oftentimes it naturally occurs. We have things like our school-wide schedules, like our specials, our music, our PE, our art. We have our lunch, our recess, all those things that are built in. But we also find ourselves sometimes with long stretches of time, and those are great. Those are really great in our days for giving us continuity of instruction and trying to get through a lot of our materials. But it can also be overly daunting sometimes for our kids unless we build in some break time. Now, remember that breaks can really be an opportunity for just simply recharging our students' focus or the level of energy that they need. But it can also be a time for students that might be getting a little bit stressful, a little anxious, that things have been kind of building up during some of that learning process. Not to mention there are cases where some kids just get overstimulated from certain activities that we've been doing. So breaks can be worked in. They can be worked into our day, sometimes for the entire class. It might be done in smaller groups of kids, or it might even need to be done just for a single single child in specific situations. We can do it in lots of different ways, lots of creative ways. It doesn't have to be a great time killer. But the key really is that we are intentional with our breaks and really think about them. Might be something as simple as just setting up a timer. Maybe we want to do just a little quick brief time of playing some calming music. Maybe we'll want to read a little bit from a chapter in a book that we're working on. Might be playing just a short bit of a game. Maybe nothing more than standing up next to our desks and stretching and talking, visiting with our neighbor for a second. Again, it doesn't have to be something complicated, but taking that brief moment away from the work that we're doing is really important for our kids. Just giving a chance to kind of regroup. A good note for teachers to think about is if you look around, be observant. If your class or maybe even a specific child or group of kids seems like they need a break, good rule of thumb is they probably do. Another quick thought to think about is working in transitions. Think about that too within our day. Think about how it looks when you change from one activity to the next. Simply saying, okay, let's put away our books and get out the next thing. For some kids can be really, really challenging. Some students really struggle a good bit with making those changes, and we need the benefit of having time for transition, and having some cues for transition. So, and it may be even having a mix of visuals and auditory prompts ahead of that transition. So think about it. It may be necessary to provide them the prompts even several times. For instance, you may want to give kids a kind of a 10-minute warning that they need to wrap up their reading. You're going to be moving into math at that time. In another case, you might want in 5 more minutes, ring the bell or flicker the lights, remind them. You're going to get ready to prepare to wrap up because you're going to be starting, math very shortly, and you need to put all those books away, get your math books out, make sure you have your homework ready to grade. You might even, with older kids, write this on the board, give them some bullet points, let them know exactly what you're going to expect of them. And then give them that final 2-minute warning signal again that you need to be fully into transition because math is getting ready to start. So, think about these. These are great training prompts. And think about it. Adults have them. We have it on apps on our phone, getting those kind of warnings all the time now. So likewise, we also want to make sure that we have posted on our boards all of our classroom expectations. I mean, teachers all the time now have certainly classroom rules posted in their class, but how are we doing that? Providing an opportunity again after a longer break, sitting down again with the kids and just giving them a reminder what our expectations are. Good reminder also is to keep those class expectations short. This might be a time to even shorten them a little bit more if we have kind of a long list of expectations, but also to keep them stated in very positive ways. What do we expect from our kids rather than what we do not want our kids to be doing? For example, we don't want to have a list of rules like we won't be talking when someone else is talking. We won't be taking something that belongs to someone else. And let's make sure we don't use our hands or feet in unkind ways. Instead, we want to use more generalized expectations, such as we will be respectful of others, and we want to make sure we treat them the way we want to be treated. Of course, we all know that is Matthew 7:12, or the golden rule. And everything we want to always do unto others is that we want them to do unto us. But keep in mind, too, that by clumping or generalizing those expectations, we get a chance to create just a brief list of 2 to 4 rules, possibly. And when we do that, it's much more manageable for our students. And it's more manageable for us, too, as we're working with our kids. So we can think about that. Now, as we work through those routines and expectations, we also get a chance to know a little bit more about our students, too. So on the next slide, if you will, please, we can think about for the kids in the classroom, think about for that child or a couple of kids in our classroom who do have specific disabilities. We really want to try to have some semblance of understanding what is it like to live with that challenge all the time. Think about, just imagine how would it be to always try to struggle to pay attention or to have difficulty sitting still all the time. Imagine how it would be if you have to struggle to pay attention, or imagine if you were unable to use one of your limbs. I had a child that at the age of 7 months had a stroke and on one side. And how would that be? if you had to live that way day in and day out. Now, while most of us can't fully understand the actual life in the day of, we can have empathy for that experience. Now, similarly, we want to remember that every student, whether they have a disability or not, they are unique. They are very unique and special in their own right. And effective teaching always begins with getting to know that uniqueness of our students. So it's all about who they are as that unique learner. What are their individual strengths? What are their areas of need? How can we best address those needs? How might we best motivate them? How do we challenge them? You know, as a special educator, that's what we're always thinking about. And so just as we think about writing goals, a special educator is always thinking about writing goals for students with special needs. We can think about goal setting with all of our students. Now, we don't have to actually develop IEP goals, thankfully, but we can still personalize how we think about our students. And that lets our students know that we are thinking about them and that they are known and loved for themselves. Now, we just have to make sure that those goals are very specific, they're clearly set, and they are just challenging enough for each student. We never want to dumb it down, but we want to make sure that they are set well for them. And be sure to take time always to discuss those goals with the students, along with the progress that they're making on those goals. And as we consider the uniqueness of each student, we also want to realize that there are individual sensory temperaments of each of those students. And Tracy, would you mind sharing some of that with us?
Yeah, sure. Yeah, oftentimes students with disabilities have sensory needs. I think everybody has, preferences over their senses, over how they prefer their lighting or how they prefer their temperature. You always hear the silliness between husbands and wives where they're fighting over the thermostat in the house, and the husband wants it cooler and the wife wants it warmer. Those are all sensory needs. Or some people don't like loud noises where other people prefer that. It's the same with our children with who have disabilities who are in our classrooms. So, some things to think about include the lighting. Sometimes our students don't like the harsh lights of the fluorescent lighting. So if you have an opportunity to use lighting, if you have lots of windows in your classroom, use that natural sunlight or lighting from lamps, if you're allowed to have lamps in your room. But pay attention to your students and how they're reacting to the lighting in your classroom. Temperature. Temperature is sometimes too hot and too cold. Kids also respond that way. I know when I was in the classroom, all of my boy students always seemed to be always sweaty and hot. And so, they would take off their sweatshirts, and that's fine. Allow students to take off those layers and put them on the back of their chairs. Or if you have hooks in your classroom where they can get up and be comfortable in their space so they can learn better. If you're too hot or too cold, learning is really difficult. Smells is another one. Some children are very, very sensitive to the scents around them. So if you're wearing perfume or cologne, be sensitive to that. If you are, using some sort of air freshener in your classroom, be sensitive to how your students are reacting. If a student is sitting near an air freshener or a candle, or if you've got oil or whatever going up, and they're kind of acting out, and you can't figure out why, maybe consider what that smell is. Some children have an aversion to the way other children smell. Their sense of smell is so powerful that they can smell other children. And also old food, or, something that's in your classroom that shouldn't be there, so just be aware of those things and pay attention when kids mention that stuff. Seating options. So these are the visual and the auditory distractions that might happen in your classroom, and those senses that are being used there. Some children prefer to sit in the front of the classroom. That way, the teacher can provide those nonverbal cues to get them back on task, or this is the page we need to be on, or I need you to stop fiddling with that, or whatever the little cue is. Sometimes it's good to have the student sitting in the front, but that student might be distracted by, if it's near the classroom door, they might be distracted by another class walking through and the noise that class is making in the hallway, or the visual distraction of watching all those children walk by the classroom door. So be aware of that. And then likewise, some children do better sitting in the way back of the classroom. I'm a way back person. I prefer to sit in the way back of everything. I like to see what's happening in front of me. And some children just like to sit in the back because they don't want to be in the front and they don't want the feeling of everyone's eyes on them or that everyone is watching them. So they do better sitting in the back. So that's another sensory issue to be considering and thinking about when you're doing your seating chart and what's best for your classroom. Another sensory issue to think about is motor needs, small motor, large motors needs for kids. Some kids need to really use their large muscles and they need to bounce around, they need to walk, they need to move, they need to have heavy lifting, they need to have that engagement of their larger muscles. So ask your special ed teacher. There are lots of different ways that you can handle that in your classroom. I know that I would have a space in the back if my students needed to get up and move. I taped off a little area and that's the spot where you could jump up and down, or that's the spot you could do toe touches, things like that. But again, you have to do what's best for your classroom, and you have to take time to teach students how and when to use that space. There's also small motor skills. Some children with disabilities have a very difficult time controlling their small motor function, and that's like the writing and cutting, that the small motor of digging through their pencil bag to get out their whatever they need to, their markers, taking caps off of markers, things like that. Even putting papers in folders can be a function of small motor skills. So be aware of that and how you can arrange your classroom to meet those needs. Again, ask your SPED teacher, but there might be a certain pencil grip that works for your student. There might be some rubber bands, very large, thick bands that you can put on the legs of the chairs and the kids can bounce on them. There's resources out there your SPED teacher would know, but it's an easy Google too if you feel like you need to do that in your classroom. The other sense is sound. Some children do better having headphones on, the loud sounds around them, or even just what we consider to be natural, normal sounds of a classroom is too much for students with sensory issues. And so having a set of headphones, and usually it's younger children who use headphones. We don't often see them with older children unless there's something pretty major going on. But it's not out of the ordinary, and it's not like not allowed. But have the headphones to protect their ears and to have them be soothed and feeling more settled in an environment where it's pretty noisy. Another option for sensory, the sense of sound, is to have music or not have music. There's a new theory out there called the color of noise, and then how different noises are kind of related to colors. There's white noise, we all know white noise, and then there's brown noise and pink noise and red noise. And those noises, those color noises, all have sounds that have different frequencies and different low tones, and they affect us all differently. It's a brain reaction. So be aware of that. And if you're playing music in the classroom, take a look around and how your students are reacting to the type of music. Maybe it's music that's getting them psyched up and really excited and hyped up, and you want them to work quietly. You might need to change your music so that it's a soothing, meditative type music. And to be playing that not at a too loud level or too soft. Again, go back to your students and get their engagement with it and see what they want and what they need. Sometimes it's a good thing and sometimes it's not. So as the professional, you need to make that decision. Another option is to have some, again, talking to your SPED teacher, having some fidgets. So children have tactile needs as well sometimes, and they need to, instead of moving their large muscles, all they need to do is kind of play around with their fingers a little bit. It's that person sitting in a meeting who's always clicking their pen, or that person in the meeting who's always chewing on their pen or their pencil. Students also do those things. So if a child is always fiddling around with their pencil, look at fidget toys, or allow them to play with the pencil if that's okay with you and if that fits into your classroom. Some teachers will put Velcro strips underneath the desk and the student can run their fingers along it, or they can pull it on and off. All kinds of different tricks. There's also weighted lap pads. There's weighted balls. There's different things. Talk to your SPED teacher if you feel like a fidget box would do. or something in your sensory corner, your take a break corner type of thing. Maybe just have some resources available to your students. But again, teaching them when to use them and how to use them is really important. All right, BJ is going to talk to us about multisensory in learning, not just in the classroom. But what do you have, BJ?
All right, well, we know and sensory is just a huge piece of mine. I just love that.
Yeah.
We can stay on that one all day. But also that multi-sensory piece is such a big piece too, and there's the planning and for about 10 years I taught special ed with kindergartners, and I said we used to see it, hear it, taste it, touch it. But I think I gained 50 pounds just eating as well, because we did the tasting on top of it all. Can't do that at all grade levels, but thinking in terms of multi-sensory and what that means, and using all the senses with kids in lessons, because we think always of seeing and hearing, but what else can we do? And we think about how we learn. We know that some of us simply need to hear something and we remember it. That's not me by any means. Others of us need to see it and remember it. And then others of us, and this is more my style, I need to hear it, see it, but I also need to write it down to remember something. So many of us, our brains process things very differently. And as teachers, we accommodate those differences in our students' learning, and that helps them to better understand and to remember. So when we plan and we prepare our lessons, we want to consider a myriad of ways that we can present information and have our students engage in the lessons. And it's so much fun. I mean, I think that's really kind of the joy of being a teacher and planning, is preparing in ways and thinking, how many different ways can I present this information? How many different ways can I engage the students in the process? And also help them to not only engage in it, but also in processing that information and presenting that information back and sharing it themselves to show that they have learned it. So, for example, when we give oral directions, we also want to be writing that information on the board or have it posted somewhere. We think of anchor charts and things that we have posted in classrooms, giving them an opportunity to review and see it again and have multiple opportunities to see it. Getting things and having visual support. When we're discussing something, a location, for instance, and scientific concepts, we're wanting to have photographs or graphic images, certainly maps and things in front of the kids. Videos are certainly very popular and great opportunities now. Having visual effects combined with the auditory. Posted here the humpback whale, just the idea, rather than to try to just read about a humpback whale and try to understand what it looks like, but to really have a picture and a graphic, and even better than that, to have pictures and to see that actually, and what they look like is so much more engaging for kids. Taking something to even extending activities into the tactile, going well beyond just the writing tools that we use, but consider manipulatives, especially right now with math. Math is an area, and I've just completed interviewing a lot of principals and hearing about where the greatest needs have been in many of their schools. And math, we often don't think of that, but that has been one of the greatest areas of loss since COVID for many students academically. And we know from a lot of the research that using manipulatives is really an area of building strength in learning new information in math. And it's an area that a lot of times we forget to use hands-on tools for teaching math. We go into the representational or into the abstracts, I think, much too soon. But if we were to bring on more tactile activities and more manipulative activities and get into the real concreteness of math, even at the older, even into the middle grades, it can be far more effective. So thinking about that, considering manipulatives for math instruction, a lot more benefit there with working those hands-on materials when we're learning those new concepts. So think about even sitting and working on varied surfaces. When Tracy was talking about sensory, having a variety of seating surfaces. You'll go into a lot of classrooms today and teachers will have a variety of seating opportunities in a classroom. But it really helps for enhancing task focus, but it also really helps for concentration and for even retention of the material that we've presented. But that can also help working with the surface that you work on as well. Thinking about whether it's a bumpy surface that you're working on, even with the writing concept, whether it's smooth, how we're just working on, if you're using felt, for instance, if you're working with manipulatives to be able, whether you're touching a very smooth surface or to be able to have your fingers touching something like with more of a nap to it, such as a felt or something where they're picking up. A lot more retention to that to get that tactile feedback going on. So think about that in your lesson planning. We want to use color too. That's, I think we forget a lot of times. We hear about that with I think it's fascinating, the research that's going on with the color of noise. We often don't think about, but color visually too really enhances learning in a lot of different ways. It enhances again, our focus and our retention and our concentration. But think about it in ways too that can link things like giving directions or information specifically. Think about colors such as something so simple as, let's label our nouns green because we find the subjects first. So we're making a link there. Then we'll slow down a little bit and we'll label our verbs in yellow, since that's the next thing we're going to do, and maybe go on to red after that for the next item. So then linking that also, just thinking about, again, using highlighters there, again, another tactile kind of skill there, and more color. Kids of all ages love using things like highlighters. So linking those kinds of activities. Also want to be ensured that we engage our large muscle activities with kinesthetic movement during learning. Again, get those kids up and out of their seats. Really helps, again, with that improved concentration and focus and memory and retention. There is so much that goes on with big muscle engagement. We see that with younger students, certainly with our preschool kids and early grades, but we forget to do that in our upper grades and middle grades. Bring that into it again with even our 5th and our 6th graders. Even creative thinking and problem solving are linked into big muscle movement. So seek out those opportunities to get our students out of their seats, get them clapping, making letters with their bodies, jumping up and down, stomping their feet. Can really take out some aggressive sides they may have and need to do, and some anxiety that's going on. But it's not just the activities we want to consider varying. Even the materials are worthy of our plans as well. And Tracy, you're going to cover some of that kind of stuff for us as well.
Yeah. So not only, having a very varied approach to how kids are using their bodies in the classroom, but also the learning materials that they are presented with. Like I said earlier, you might have students in your classroom who are on the gifted end of learning, as well as having some learning disabilities. So they're going to kind of need both sides. And then the other students in your classroom as well, some of them have more information about a topic than other kids, or more experience with the topic. So I'm sure you've all heard of differentiated learning, and that's where this comes in, is providing materials, learning materials at different levels. That's not going to change the goal, the concept that you are teaching your students. You're just presenting it at different levels, so the concept can be understood by children who have maybe a higher level of understanding of that concept, children who are at level, and then children who are below level. You still want that concept to be taught, understood, learned, but you're presenting it differently. For example, reading A to Z will provide a lesson or a book on maybe on comprehension at 3 different levels. It's the same story, but there maybe one level has more complicated vocabulary words or more intricate details about that topic. And then you've got your at level. If you're teaching a 5th grade reading, something at 5th grade, and then they have that same book written for a little bit lower, less vocabulary, less intricate details, but still that idea is presented in a way that that child understands at their level. It's meeting the children where they are. So as the classroom teacher who knows your students, you get to choose who gets what level. That's one of the reasons for, you know, our testing that we do. We can use the results of that testing to determine where kids are and what kind of materials they're going to get. So it can be, you know, pretty busy in your classroom when you're thinking about the different types of sensory needs that a student has to learn and to pick up information. And then you think about the academic needs and the variations within that. So got to be on your toes and knowing your students pretty well to meet their needs on all those different levels. But you're the teacher, you get to know your students really well. You're the professional. And when you choose to incorporate all that flexibility, you just have a more successful, more lively classroom, and the students are going to really thrive in that area. Another area to talk about is smaller group instruction and how that can help students be more successful as well.
Yes, and that's a very common strategy used by special ed teachers, is that smaller group instruction. And while in our gen ed classes, we frequently teach to the full class, it is possible to intentionally seek out those opportunities to assign students into the smaller groups for, as Tracy mentioned, differentiated instruction. In fact, studies have found that smaller groups can actually boost students' confidence. They often empower for more reserved students, for those, you know, those quieter students, the students that don't talk a lot in the large group. And it really empowers them to engage more with their classmates when they get in that smaller, that more reserved, more intimate group. And it's just far more effective for those kids. And they just really come out. In fact, as a special educator and having spent a lot of time with small groups and had kids who oftentimes had lower self-esteems and who struggled with those kinds of things, it really was effective to see them get into the small groups and have a chance to engage and really really boost their feelings when they could do that. So anyway, really appreciate the smaller groups. But there are two factors that were really key for me for these kids that were below grade level with poor self-esteems, and those smaller groups being able to foster greater collaboration among their group members, and just overall learning and retention goes up when those kids are in the smaller groups. They actually get more time on task with one another, and it becomes kind of a social activity form of instruction because of that. And that just really it's just a great way to interact. But the thought of creating smaller groups can really sound overwhelming. It can sound complicated. And we have to really be intentional again. We have to really consider how can it be used to personalize those learning activities for our kids. And to do so, we have to think about similar interests. We have to think about similar skill levels, think about their learning styles. What are some of their like needs that they have? Groups don't have to stay the same. They can change all the time based on the kids' needs, again, their interests and things like that. One group could be working on very basic math skills. Another group could be working on more advanced skills. I worked with older students, and so maybe I had a group working on pre-algebra or geometry, while another group was still working on very basic just carrying or borrowing skills in basic computations. So the classroom teacher can provide very direct instruction with one group of students, and another group might be able to learn well through just the interactions with one another. Another group might be working at learning centers, or some students maybe even working independently. I think it's a great opportunity to teach independence with a lot of students, because they're going to have to work more independently while you're working with another group. It does take some time to train students, because you're going to be working with students, helping them to work. What are your expectations for them while you're working with the smaller groups? But it is absolutely worth the time and the effort that you take on that. We do have some additional tools available on this topic on our resource page. There's some great training opportunities out there for this. but it's a great opportunity to work with kids. Also want to keep in mind our next slide, if you will, please. Also want to keep in mind as we work with our kiddos that we do want to be sure to acknowledge the progress that they make. Behavior experts generally do recommend that we share at least 5 praises or compliments, if you will, with every one criticism that we have. But how we do so really does make a difference. And it can be so easy, it can actually be habit forming, if you will, to say things like, great job, or, you know, good work that you're doing, good job, great work you're doing. But what does it really mean to the students? What did the students do that was good? What did they do that was so great? We need to really be strategic in recognizing what our students are doing well. We need to tell them specifically what they're doing because we want to reinforce those skills. We want to reinforce those behaviors. We want them to continue to do what they're doing well, and be confident in that so they can continue to do it. And we also want to remember that our best praises are going to emphasize their effort. And we want to be specific. We want to give them strategies for learning. So for example, rather than just saying, good job, great work, we want to say something like, you have put in so much effort in your reading that you've reached a great spot in that chapter. Or that is a great way to check your answers. Keep it up. Give them ideas so that they know exactly what they're working on and they can try it again. Something else we want to also avoid is being too rote in our praise. Instead, try mixing it up. There are a variety of different kinds of praise that we can use, and it's kind of fun to play with different types. And some kids will respond better to one type over another. So we can provide, for example, explicit praise after a skill lesson, like circling the key information is so helpful in these weird problems. That lets the child know specifically that that was a good idea. We should try that again. Might give them a verbal thumbs up for gratitude. So thanks for remembering to write your name down and writing your date on your math papers. Common one. Another opportunity might call for someone to give them a positive attention. Now that you've written your paragraph, would you like to share it with me? Encouraging them to do so again. It's lots of great kinds of things, again, available on this topic for praise. But a few other thoughts that we've added, we have put on the resource page again for just some additional thoughts for you, because there's so much on this, and praise for some kids can actually be anxiety ridden, and for other kids, we can over abuse it and use it. So we want to be very careful with that. Tracy, you also had some ideas when it comes to that social and emotional side with the needs of the kids.
Right. Along with praise, or that criticism comes with their social and emotional needs of students. And this is a really hot topic in schools across the country. Oftentimes addressing those social and emotional needs of your students is just kind of embedded in your day. When 2 students are arguing about whose pencil is laying on the floor and they can't work it out, it's your job to kind of get in there and help them work that out. Or an older student is struggling with their best friend and they come to you with, I don't understand, or what do I say? It's your job as their teacher, as their adult model, to walk them through how to work that out. So what is shown is that even our own moods and needs are apparent to our students, and the best way to handle students' social and emotional needs is to model through our own. So as our day goes on, everybody's our moods change 100 times within a day, depending on what's happening around you. And students see that. They can see when you just had a difficult conversation with your principal, or when you and your colleagues just had a good laugh in the hallway and you come back in and you bring that energy to your classroom and that smile is on your face. They see that. They know when you're not feeling well, when you're upset, when you're over the moon happy. Within those feelings, it's really a good idea to share that with your class but also acknowledging that there's a professional boundary that you need to walk up to. You don't want to share all the gory details about what's going on. But it's okay to share and let them know you're human and how their thought process goes through those social and emotional needs. It's kind of nice in the fact that we're Christian educators, so we can always remind students that Jesus loves us no matter what. There's nothing that we can do that would make him not love us. So all the emotions are okay. He gave those emotions to us. It's just learning how to regulate them, how they affect us, and how our own emotions affect other people. Our emotions do spread out. They're ripples in a water, and they do affect everybody. So as adults in the classroom, we can verbalize what we're feeling and how we're working through it. So an example is, let's say you're in the middle of teaching something and you've got a group of students in the back who are just chattering. All of your looks aren't working, and please, let's pay attention. All of your verbal, nonverbal cues not working. And then finally you just say, wow, I'm really frustrated right now. So right there, you're naming your emotion. And then, you want to tell them why you feel that way. So many of our friends right now are talking, and I'm trying to teach you mixed fractions. It's making my heart beat really fast and my body feels really tight. I'm just really frustrated. And then you want to tell them what you want instead. So if it's a negative emotion, what do you want them to do instead? So, I would really like everyone to just quiet down and just let me teach this so we can get on to our next lesson, or we can get on to doing our homework, or we can get on to questions, whatever that is that you want them to know. So identify the emotion, what it's doing inside your body, and what you want instead. 3 easy ways to talk about that feeling that's inside of you. If it's in a positive emotion, it's sort of the same thing. Oh my gosh, I'm so over the moon happy right now. You're identifying the feeling. And then why are you feeling that way? Oh my gosh, I just got an email from the principal and she's giving everybody an extra 10 minutes of recess today. Oh, that's so awesome. Holy cow. But then instead of telling what you want, you have to be able to verbalize why you need to control that emotion. We can't always react to the emotion we're feeling. We can't always just start standing up and jumping up and down. Oh my God, I'm so excited. You have to sometimes be in control of yourself. So in that situation, even though I'm super happy and all I want to do is stand up and jump up and down, I know I've got to control it because we've got to get cleaned up. We've got to put our things away, and then we can go outside for recess. But I'm so happy. That way, kids are hearing you as the professional and the role model in their school setting, how you're working through those positive and negative emotions. That way they can identify with that, and they might be able to internalize. It's a point of reference. When a student displays an emotion, you can say, hey, remember when I was feeling that way? What did I do? How can you do that? Let's talk about this. And you can offer that support and that help with your students, walking them through their emotions and how they either need to control it or how they can just go ahead and feel it at that moment if the time is right. One more topic for you, BJ.
Well, finally, the one word that so many seem to associate with special ed teachers more than any other. When someone first learns that Tracy or I are special ed teachers, or anyone is, they always seem to say the same thing. So we've talked about this. Oh, you must have so much. Finish the sentence. The word is patience. But in reality, though, patience is not a virtue that should be kept just for the special ed teacher. It is, as one teacher expressed, a gift. It's a virtue. It is a necessity for all teachers. Every classroom teacher has a student or several who needs a little patience from the teacher. As Tracy reminded me, patience comes from understanding. Now, we strive to take each new day. We need to remember to see the humility. We need to reach for that extra bit of empathy. We need to be patient with, or remember to strive to understand, if you will, not only our students, maybe even some of our parents or our colleagues, might even be an administrator or two. And we need to be patient with ourselves. as well for each new day. And we need to laugh. We need to find the daily joys in our classrooms. Remember, it's calling to be a teacher, to serve alongside these precious, precious students. And finally, we need to remember to be in prayer for everything we need, for all these lesson plans, all these bits and pieces. And with that, Al, we have shared everything that we have in our collection of SPED 101 for the general ed classroom, at least for 10.
That is awesome. And yes, you have given us a lot. And if you have any questions, feel free to place those in chat. Will is checking the chat. And as always, I always have questions because I'm always trying to figure out how to be able to do what I should be able to do, and I don't know enough to do, kind of thing, right? And some of these I just love. You talked about preparing the students for change. I learned that a great deal when I was an educator. Probably something I didn't know immediately because I'm thinking, well, we should treat them just like all other students, and this is fine. It's not. Remember, each one of your students is very unique and learn in different ways. We're called to care for them, and it's okay. For instance, I had a student with high anxiety, and would sit right next to the door, and we had an agreement. If you need to get up and leave. Just give me a little. I know what's going on. Not a problem, and we're good. And I'll figure out and make sure you're okay and stuff too after you leave. But fire drills, a big item, right? And something that would really throw off not just that student, but many of our students who had different learning needs and anxieties and everything else. And it was okay if I told that student, look, we're going to have a fire drill at 10 o'clock. Let's get on the same page. How can we get through this? Do you need to maybe exit the building early or something like that? We'll figure this out, but what works? And that was fine. If it's a fire, we'll be okay and we'll handle that. But as a fire drill, I need to put you in a good position.
It's not worth it for the rest of your day.
Well, yeah, and sometimes even the rest of the following days too, right?
Yeah,
because honestly, the recovery time for us, all of us, it's not the same. So you can have an episode like that, and the recovery time for that student might be several days to get comfortability back. And we're trying to think, well, you should just be able to be right back in it, right? No, that's not the case. So really, one of the great benefits of Lutheran schools, we always talk about it. It's about the relationships, about really knowing our students, about knowing the families. That's one of those cases. And by knowing that, we can put the students in a position to be successful, not just at that moment, the rest of the day, the rest of the week, and so on, because we've done something positive in that to help them. I think that's incredibly important. Displays, you talked about this in terms of just the classroom rules and some of these other items. Let me ask you though, because there's fine points on that, right? There's just enough, and then there's too much. What's that fine line between posting all of this versus, oh my gosh, there's so much going on in this room that there's no way I'm ever going to be focused on what I need to do. Any thoughts?
That's why I mentioned the class rules. I only had 2 class rules.
Yeah.
I mean, and for the life of me, I can't remember what the second one was. Basically, the golden rule was the number 1. I mean, that kind of takes in all of them. And I had a second one, and I cannot remember what it was.
Yeah, really, it's about love God and love others, right? I mean,
and that's what it was. And
doing that, we'll be okay in all of our actions.
Well, you know what? That's what it was. It was that, and treat others as you want to be treated. That basically was it, because that encompassed everything. And we would discuss that. So my class rules were very simple. And in terms of classroom information in the room, again, I always kept posted what you absolutely needed for what we were doing today. But that was it. And it came down again because you didn't need old information up.
Yeah.
Because that, for one, it just becomes background noise, if you will, back to the noise, right? It's just visual noise.
Great point.
And it becomes old and they're not going to take it in anyway. So
And it's
always
confusing
changing,
too, right?
keeping up.
Old stuff gets them confused.
Right.
And it gets all of us confused because now I'm trying to figure out, oh, wait a minute, what was that? Now I'm over here. And yeah, great point.
And they don't look at it anymore because it's just always there. You don't even notice it's up anymore.
Exactly. I also love too, I was laughing in here when you're talking about the positive, put things in a positive manner. Don't say all the things you can't do and everything. Those are an exhaustive list. You never cover them all. And I laughed a little bit in here because we did this with our dress code. You go on forever and ever about don't wear this, don't wear that, this, the other, all of that. But if you break it down into this is what you may wear, you get 5 things. And if it doesn't fall on that list, well, now it's not there. So how do you flip those things? I think that's something always for us to think about and not only think on our own, but this again is where it's so beneficial in a collegial environment, right? And schools better be collegial environments where we're there learning, growing with and from one another. You don't always have to do it on your own. Go to a colleague and say, hey, how can I flip this around so that it's a positive statement and not that negative statement? And think about those things, not just the school rules, but even an assignment or sometimes where we say, it can come across in a negative manner, where if you put it more in a positive, look at what we get to do, and we get to learn about this.
Sure, you're working everything.
Yeah. I think that's just such a great thought process for us in all things in schools is to figure out the positive spin on that versus the other way.
Al, can I just jump back to the visual noise in the classroom?
Absolutely.
I was a really big proponent of using poster size graphic organizers. We would create them in my classroom based on what we were learning. And, I like to save them because they're great references or resources for the students. But, eventually the whole wall is covered with these posters and there's a lot of visual noise. So what I ended up doing, just as an idea for teachers out there, is I would put holes in the top of the poster and I put all the posters on rings. And then hang them up, and the kids could just flip through like, wait, how do I do those fractions again? What is that about lowest common denominator? Okay, there was in the poster. Go over to the math posters and flip through. And what's nice about that is as they're flipping through, they're also being reminded of the other posters that we had. So it's sort of like a mini review. And then they get to the poster about lowest common denominator. Oh, that's right. This is how we do it. So it's not up all over the wall. It's just, it becomes a reference.
Yeah, great idea.
Yeah.
I also like the other one, the reminder, and we'll bring it to a close here quickly. We're going to lose our Zoom room here in a minute, but I really love the reminder, and you hit on the point. We all need them, so it's not just special education students, it's not just teachers. It's business world everywhere, right? I mean, that's why we have Outlook calendars and things pop up to remind us about all this stuff. And one of the things I learned as a teacher was not to say when somebody asked me a question, well, look over there, or it was on your paper, or it's here. It's okay. It's okay to remind them. We all need that gentle reminder. So when you remind them maybe of a due date or an event coming up or something like that, go ahead and remind them of what it is. And then you could also follow up and say, and, also if you look on your paper, it could be here too. You might want to highlight that or circle that just in case you forget, the next day, or you can always come back and see me too. Yep. So it's again, more of that positive kind of, it's there. I'm going ahead and let you know again, because that's fine. We all forget things, but I'm going to point some of this out in the process. Right. Yeah. So there's so much positive that we can do with all these questions and environments and relationships. And again, I've said this from the very beginning, I'll continue to say it. These are all things that are not only good for special education students, these are things that are good for all students and all educators. And I think that's very important.
That's been the intent. Yes.
Yeah. So thank you so much, BJ and Tracy. When I pitched this to both of you and to LASE and LSEM, it was kind of like, well, what are you trying to do and where's this going to go and how will this work? And I said, the two of you will make it happen and it will be awesome because you'll be providing benefits to our educators that then benefit all of our students in our Lutheran schools. And you have done that, and even more so than what we could have imagined in the beginning. Thank you so much for lending your voice, your expertise, and helping our educators, administrators, our students, and our families. And again, please remember, BJ and Tracy are out there if you want to contact them. I can't say enough about LASE and LSEM, two incredible organizations. They do so much, not only for special education educators and teachers, but for all of us in so many ways. Again, feel free to reach out to them, contact them. What an incredible resource for our Lutheran schools. Thank you so much to both of you, to your organizations, and everything that you do for our Lutheran schools, so they are truly educational ministries of excellence. Blessings to both of you.
Thank
You
you.
as well.